Conflict Resolution Quarterly just did a special edition on how our work changes us. And we asked, and one of the authors is sitting next to me, actually, she does restorative justice and has worked with death row inmates and families of victims on restorative justice dialogue. But when we were actually talking about this, we met in mediation training, I said it changes how I interact with my kids and my community and my colleagues, although I'm, of course, a work in progress, as my colleagues will tell you. So I'm wondering, how has your work changed you? How has it changed the way you see the world or anything else?
You want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. So really practical examples, some of the research that we undertake with academic partners is on rewiring the brain and how neurocognition changes when you're affected by conflict and you're doing trauma healing work. And that's been absolutely fundamental in the work we've done, for example, with youth leaders emerging from conflict. And who is it that emerges as a leader, and why is that? How do they deal with that tension and that conflict? But one of the pieces that we've been looking at is how do you change your frame of reference to be more oriented towards living in the moment and emphasizing the positive. And so just small example, and my children will kill me, but I started a gratitude chain so that every night the family talks about what they're grateful for in the course of the day. And they have to share that with the rest of my nuclear family, because the research shows that if you do that on a daily basis and you write it down, and actually you're supposed to write it, but we do it electronically because we're in different places, in 30 days you can change your own neural pathways to be more positive in your orientation and the way that you look at your frame of reference. So it's something that comes directly from the most recent neurological research as applied to trauma healing that I'm trying to use within my own family to ensure that they're resilient going forward.
Thank you. Gary?
Mine is probably much less elegant than that in terms of how I've been transformed by my work. And I guess, when in starting up Water Partners, which was the predecessor to water.org, back in 1990, like I said, I came out, I had 3 engineering degrees. And as you can probably guess by our work around water credit and finance, I'd probably been much better served being an MBA. And so that's really how I've transformed, is that coming into that, I thought I was going to be an engineer out drilling wells, and that was going to solve the water crisis. And it was only through having a certain level of curiosity and, looking at the world differently and talking to a lot of people, particularly poor women who lived in slums around the world, to get the insight that's like, I need to rethink this. It's like the solution, like I said, contains its own problem, or the problem contains its own solution. And that is like, okay, we need to figure out how to retool and make this not about engineering and make it about finance and kind of reinvent ourselves as an organization. And we continue to do that. Even now, we incubated and completely spun off a whole new entity called Water Equity. And so Water Equity goes beyond philanthropy, and now we raise investment capital, right? So we actually go out into the capital markets, raise social impact investing capital, use that to fuel the microloans so that investors actually get their money back and they get a financial return on that. And so we actually, just like Fidelity or Charles Schwab or others, we are now an investment fund manager with Water Equity to be able to raise what we hope will be billions of dollars to invest into this space. So to me, it's been more of a trial, insight, and some error, and then moving on and reinventing myself, but also reinventing the organization. And it always comes back to, what is that barrier standing between a poor person and water? And ask that question repeatedly and agnostically as to what is the next barrier, and always looking to removing the next barrier after we solve for one. And that's kind of what's transformed me.
Great. Thank you very much. Kevin?
Yeah, so having done this for more than 35 years, what's what's transformed me is really my students. As they go off into the world, they come to us as amazing people, which brings them to the kind of work that we do and that you are now doing. And then they go off into the world. And not just the ones that I touch personally, but Tim referred to articles or chapters or books that I've written that students read in other places. So that's the social scientist research part of me, the peer-reviewed articles and all of that stuff. You write it, you do it as a social scientist. You don't do it necessarily as an activist. And you look at the role of culture in peace operations, or you look at the role of culture in cultural differences in creating impedances in crisis negotiations between the Chinese and the Americans. So you study stuff as a social scientist, you write it. Some of it you teach to your own students, but a lot of it, as an academic, it goes off into the world, and it ends up on the curricula of courses all over the planet. And that's both personally gratifying to me, right? But I think it's also a way in which I contribute beyond my ability over 35 years to reach out and actually touch people in a classroom.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your answers.